An unknown fleet. In the depths of space, an emergency meeting had been convened on the Galactic Alliance command ship. Commander Zorgax, a grizzled Vorthian veteran, scowled at the holographic display. "What do you mean the configuration doesn't match anything in our databases?" he demanded of his intelligence officer. "That fleet just entered our sovereign space." The officer, a young Grell named Yanzix, manipulated the display to highlight the intruders. A few dozen angular silver ships of varying sizes were proceeding on a steady course towards the Alaxar colony, one of the Alliance's most productive outposts. "Apologies, Commander, but it's true," Yanzix said nervously. "Computer analysis indicates a 99.8% probability these ships are of an entirely unknown design. Our best guess is they originate from an uncontacted system, possibly the one the primitive natives call Earth." Zorgax leaned back, his brow furrowed in thought. Uncontacted system or not, they couldn't just let a mystery fleet move unchallenged through their territory. He had a duty to protect the member species of the Alliance. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Broadcast on all frequencies. Identify us and demand they state their business." He watched the unknown ships on the monitor, an uneasy feeling growing in his chest. What was a species capable of such ships doing all the way out here? As his communications officer sent the hail, Zorgax could only wait and see how these newcomers would respond. If they proved hostile, the Alliance fleet stationed at Alaxar would deal with them swiftly and decisively. But something told him, as he gazed at the tight, purposeful formation of the alien ships, that this encounter would not be so straightforward. The Alliance had grown complacent in its dominance of this sector. Perhaps that had been a mistake. Captain Aria's mission. "Status report." Captain Aria Vargas called out as she strode onto the bridge of the UES Artemis. Her crew snapped to attention, their faces tense but determined. "Distress signal from Alaxar colony confirmed, Captain," her first officer, Commander Donovan, replied. "Colony defenses are reporting an attack by unknown hostiles. They're requesting immediate aid." Aria frowned as she studied the display. Alaxar wasn't an Earth colony, but rather one belonging to the Galactic Alliance, a multi-species polity that dominated this region of space. Technically, as a non-member, Earth had no obligation to intervene. But Aria had standing orders from Earth Command to render aid to any sapient beings in need, to prove humanity's commitment to being a force for good in the galaxy. They couldn't ignore this plea for help. "The Alliance fleet isn't responding?" she asked. "No, ma'am," Donovan said. "In fact, we're being hailed by Alliance ships right now. They're demanding we identify ourselves and state our intentions." Aria's eyes narrowed. The nerve of them, to question her fleet while their own colony burned. She had no patience for bureaucratic nonsense when lives were at stake. "Put them through," she said, straightening her uniform. The face of a gray-skinned, crimson-eyed alien filled the view screen. His expression was stern, his tone clipped as he spoke. "Unknown ships, this is Commander Zorgax of the Galactic Alliance. You are trespassing in our sovereign territory. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or face the consequences." Aria met his gaze unflinchingly. "This is Captain Aria Vargas of the United Earth ship Artemis. We received a distress call from your colony at Alaxar and came to provide aid. As is our policy, I suggest you stop wasting time threatening us and let us assist in repelling the ongoing attack." Zorgax's eyes widened at her audacity. "Impossible," he sputtered. "Humanity is a primitive species. You couldn't possibly." He broke off, visibly collecting himself. "I warn you, Captain, if you interfere in Alliance affairs, we will have no choice but to consider it an act of war." Aria leaned forward, her gaze hardening. "Then I will give you a warning in return, Commander. Earth may be new to the galactic stage, but we take our ethical responsibility seriously. Threaten us for doing the right thing, and you'll see just how primitive our ships and weapons are. We won't start a fight, but we'll damn well finish one if we must." Vargas out. As the screen went dark, Arya turned to her crew. They looked back at her with determination and pride shining in their eyes. They knew what was at stake. It was time to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. Set course for Alaxar, maximum speed, Arya ordered. Battle stations, everyone. Let's go make some new friends. Uneasy negotiations. Commander Zorgax paced in his ready room, his thoughts racing. The human captain's words echoed in his mind. You'll see just how primitive our ships and weapons are. Could it be a bluff? Surely this upstart species couldn't hope to challenge the might of the Galactic Alliance. And yet, the confidence in Vargas' voice, the unflinching resolve in her eyes, those were not the marks of a primitive race, but of a people who knew their own strength. He had to tread carefully. His ruminations were interrupted by a chime at the door. "Enter," he called out. Yanzix hurried in, data tablet in hand. "Commander, we finished our scans of the human fleet. Their ships, they're like nothing we've seen before. Advanced particle shielding, some kind of spatial distortion weapons. If our readings are correct, they may actually exceed our own technology in some respects." Zorgax held up a hand, his expression grim. "And their course, still headed for Alaxar at maximum speed." "Sir, what are your orders?" The fleet commanders are champing at the bit for some glory against the primitives. But absolutely not, Zorgax growled. "The last thing we need is open war with an unknown power." Hail the human captain again. "Let us negotiate." Moments later, Captain Vargas' face filled the view screen once more. Zorgax forced himself to speak calmly, diplomatically. "Captain Vargas, in light of your revelations about Earth's capabilities, I have ordered the fleet to stand down and cease hostilities against your ships. We wish to avoid any misunderstandings between our peoples." Arya raised an eyebrow. "And the attack on Alaxar, has that also ceased?" Zorgax paused for a long moment. "I have ordered a temporary halt to offensive operations, pending the outcome of our discussion. Now perhaps we can come to some agreement." "There is no agreement to be made, Commander," Arya cut him off. "Either you allow us to proceed unimpeded to Alaxar to assist the colonists, or we will go through you. There is no third option. The choice is yours." The Alliance commander clenched his fists beneath the screen, feeling a mix of outrage and grudging respect. This human was bold, principled, and utterly unyielding. "Very well, Captain. You may proceed, for now, but know that we will be watching closely, and the Galactic Alliance will not forget this interference." As the call ended, Zorgax slumped back in his chair. "Yanzix, send word to the homeworld. The Senate must be informed of these developments, and dispatch a battle group to shadow the humans, if they put one tentacle out of line." The intelligence officer saluted. "Understood, Commander. It will be done." Alone once more, Zorgax pondered the new shape of things. The galaxy, it seemed, would never be the same. The question was, would that be for good or ill? Only time would tell. Battle joined. As the Terran fleet approached the besieged Alaxar colony, Captain Arya Vargas studied the tactical display with a steely gaze. The Alliance ships had assumed a blocking position, but were holding fire. For now. Multiple contacts, bearing 2-70. Sensor Officer Liu called out. Reading as strike craft. Attack formation. Arya cursed under her breath. So much for the ceasefire. Some trigger-happy Alliance commander was clearly looking to provoke a fight. "Bring the fleet to full combat alert," she barked. "Launch Paladin interceptors and activate point defense grid. Let's show them what we're made of." The bridge crew leaped into action with cool efficiency, armed and trained for just this scenario. The Artemis shuddered slightly as her powerful engines kicked into overdrive, and her weapon systems hummed to life. On the display, the angular shapes of Paladin fighters streaked from launch bays to meet the oncoming Alliance craft. Designed for both atmospheric and space combat, the Paladins were swift, agile, and heavily armed. The dance of death began as the two groups clashed amid flashes of laser fire and missile contrails. To their credit, the Alliance pilots were skilled and fought bravely in their dart-like ships. But the humans had spent decades honing their skills against the Krell, the Viridians, and other hostile races. The Paladins wove through the enemy formation like silverfish, pounding their foes with precise strikes. Still, the strike craft were a distraction from the real threat. The looming Alliance warships. They had held back so far, perhaps unwilling to openly flout the ceasefire, but their gun ports were open and ready. Arya turned to Donovan, her eyes glinting with anticipation. "Bring us about to face the central battle group. Charge the warp cannons and stand by to engage the Singularity Drive. Let's remind them why it's a bad idea to mess with humanity." The Artemis swung ponderously to port, even as the boxy shapes of Alliance cruisers and destroyers crackled with building energy. On the bridge, the tension was palpable as the crew prepared to face the full might of the alien armada. Then, with a flash, the Alliance ships opened fire. But even as their beams and missiles hurtled through the void, the human fleet seemed to shimmer and blur. Singularity projectors, the pinnacle of Terran technological prowess, bent the very fabric of space-time around the ships, causing the deadly barrage to disappear into miniature black holes that winked out of existence almost as soon as they formed. Arya allowed herself a tight smile as the enemy fire diminished to almost nothing against the fleet's defenses. The Alliance may have had numbers, but they had never faced anything like human ships before. It was time to press the advantage. "Helm, bring us to flank speed. Tactical, lock warp cannons on the lead dreadnought. Let's take the fight to them." The mighty Artemis surged forward, the rest of the fleet close behind. The dull gray hull of the Alliance flagship filled the view screen, and then erupted into flames as the warp cannons unloaded their fury. Shields overloaded and armor shattered under the onslaught, even as the human ships danced nimbly through the point-blank firestorm. There was no joy in the destruction, only grim determination on the faces of Arya and her crew. They took no pleasure in death, but if the Alliance insisted on bloodshed, the humans would respond with all the strength and ingenuity that had taken them to the stars. Now, with the enemy fleet in disarray, the path to Alaxar colony lay open. It was time to fulfill their mission and show the galaxy what it meant to be human, to explore, to protect, and to stand united against any foe. The battle was far from over, but Earth would never yield. Technological shock. In his command chair on the Vorthian dreadnought Inexorable, Commander Zorgax watched in mute horror as the human fleet tore through his ships like a plasma torch through paper. This wasn't a battle, it was a rout. The reports flooding in from his subordinates were a litany of disbelief and desperation. The human weapons ignored their shields as if they weren't there, while their own fire was swallowed up by some kind of space-time manipulation field. And the speed and coordination of the Terran ships, it was like nothing the Alliance had ever faced. "Impossible," he muttered, even as another cruiser disappeared in a silent flash of light on the view screen. "They're just primitives. They can't have technology like this." But the evidence was right there before his eyes. The dart-like human fighters danced around his lumbering warships, pounding them with impunity. And their capital ships, they moved like living things, graceful and deadly, every action perfectly synchronized, as if controlled by a single mind. "Commander," his sensor officer cried out, panic edging his voice. "The human flagship is launching some kind of energy projectile. Readings are off the scale." Zorgax watched, his heart in his throat, as a pulsing ball of blue-white light erupted from the human battleship and hurtled towards the Inexorable. He barked orders, demanding evasive action, but it was too late. The projectile impacted amidships, and the dreadnought shuddered as if struck by the hand of an angry god. Consoles exploded and crewmen flew through the air as the ship listed heavily to one side. Damage reports flooded in. Main power offline, hull breaches on multiple decks, weapons systems down. In one stroke, the pride of the Alliance fleet had been reduced to a helpless hulk. And still the humans pressed their attack, relentless, and implacable. Their ships flashed through the shattered Alliance formation like silver ghosts, striking again and again with brutal precision. It was as if they could anticipate every desperate countermeasure, every panicked response. Zorgak slumped in his chair, his mind racing. How could the Alliance hope to stand against a power like this? If Earth decided to expand its influence, to claim the stars for itself, who could stop them? The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in a single day, and the future looked grim indeed. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm him, a small part of Zorgax's mind rebelled. The humans had only attacked when provoked, and had broadcast their peaceful intentions for all to hear. Their stated goal was to protect the innocent, not conquer the galaxy. Could it be that there was still a chance for coexistence, for a new equilibrium? As the last of his ships fell silent and the human fleet moved to secure Alaxar orbit, Zorgax made a decision. He would not let pride or fear dictate his actions. He would seek out this Captain Vargas, this emissary of Earth, and find a way forward. For the sake of the Alliance and for the future of all sapient life, he had to try. The galaxy had changed forever this day, but perhaps with wisdom and courage on both sides, it could change for the better. The road ahead would be long and hard, but the flickering ember of hope still burned. It was up to them, human and Vorthian alike, to nurture it to a flame. A new galactic dynamic. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Senate on the Alliance homeworld of Vortis Prime, the atmosphere was one of shock, outrage, and fear. The news of the disastrous battle at Alaxar had spread like wildfire, and now the assembled representatives of 100 worlds clamored for answers. At the central podium, Commander Zorgax stood resolute in the face of the barrage. He had faced the wrath of his superiors, the disbelief of his peers, and the humiliation of defeat, but he would not flinch from the truth. "Esteemed senators," he began, his voice amplified to cut through the din. "The facts are undeniable. The human fleet acted with restraint and honor, seeking only to protect the innocent. It was our own forces, blinded by arrogance and aggression, that initiated hostilities." A fresh wave of murmurs and protests greeted his words, but Zorgax pressed on. The technological prowess displayed by Earth was sobering, to say the least. "We must face the reality that we are no longer the undisputed masters of this quadrant, but that does not mean we must cower in fear or lash out in anger." He paused, letting his gaze sweep the chamber. "I have spoken at length with Captain Aria Vargas of Earth. She is a formidable leader, but also one committed to peace and cooperation between our peoples. She has expressed a sincere desire for the Alliance and Earth to forge a new relationship based on mutual respect and shared interests." The Senate exploded into a cacophony of shouts and arguments, some denouncing the humans as a threat, others cautiously supportive of Zorgax's proposal. Through it all, the Vorthian commander stood firm, a bastion of calm in the storm. "We have a choice before us," he said, his voice rising above the tumult. "We can cling to the old ways, the old fears and hatreds, and watch our civilization crumble, or we can adapt, grow, and build a future together with Earth and all the other races of the galaxy." "I know. We have a choice before us," he said, his voice rising above the tumult. "We can cling to the old ways, the old fears and hatreds, and watch our civilization crumble, or we can adapt, grow, and build a future together with Earth and all the other races of the galaxy. I know which path I choose." As the debate raged on, Captain Aria Vargas watched from the gallery, her expression pensive. The weight of history hung heavy on her shoulders, the hopes and fears of an entire species, the dream of a united galaxy. She thought back to the battle at Alaxar, to the courage and skill of her crew in the face of overwhelming odds. They had proven that day that humanity was ready to take its place among the stars, but also that with great power came great responsibility. Earth could not simply impose its will on the galaxy, no matter how advanced its technology. That way lay the path of the tyrant, the conqueror, and humanity had fought too long and hard against such forces to become one itself. No, the future lay in cooperation, in finding common ground with the other spacefaring races. The Alliance, for all its flaws, represented the best hope for that future, a forum where all voices could be heard, all grievances addressed. It would not be easy. The scars of the past ran deep, and trust would have to be built one small step at a time. But as she watched Commander Zorgax argue passionately for peace, Aria knew that the journey was worth taking. In the end, the Senate voted to open formal diplomatic relations with Earth. It was a historic moment, one that would be remembered for generations to come. The first tentative steps had been taken on the long road to a true galactic community. As she stood to leave, Aria felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Zorgax, his features lined with exhaustion, but his eyes shining with something like hope. "Thank you," he said softly, "for your restraint, your wisdom, and your willingness to see beyond the mistakes of the moment. I have a feeling this is the beginning of something extraordinary." Aria clasped his hand in return, a smile spreading across her face. "Extraordinary indeed, my friend. The future is waiting for us, and we will face it together." As she strode from the chamber to rejoin her crew, Captain Aria Vargas felt the weight of destiny upon her. The journey ahead would be long and hard, filled with challenges and setbacks. But she knew in her heart that humanity would rise to meet them, as it always had. For they were explorers and dreamers, warriors and peacemakers. They were the children of Earth, and the stars were their birthright. And now, at last, they would claim it, not as conquerors, but as friends and partners in the great dance of the cosmos. The adventure was only beginning.